Ambassador Robert O'Brien. You should put down what you're doing and listen closely. Former President Trump's last national security advisor, very skilled diplomat, formerly the special envoy for hostage affairs for President Trump. Before that, served George W. Bush in a variety of positions. A superb lawyer, and he joins me this morning, I believe, in Tel Aviv. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. Welcome back.
Greetings, Hugh, from the Holy Land.
Tell me what you were hearing off the record. You're meeting with senior Israeli officials. We're not going to name who. What are you hearing off the record from your old friends, and you spent a lot of time in Israel when you were the national security advisor, about this administration's handling of the Israeli-U.S. relationship?
Well, I think there's a feeling of heartbreak, Hugh. I was down yesterday at near Oz, the kibbutz that was attacked, and been to the music festival. And when you see the bullet holes in the safe rooms where the families and the young toddlers and kids were executed, the houses burned down, and you see what happened, the pictures of the families that will never come home plastered on the outside of their homes and on the kibbutzim, and seeing the pictures of the kids who are enjoying the music festival who are gunned down and slaughtered. It's just heartbreaking. And for America to be telling the Israelis, and Jake Sullivan happens to be here, the current national security advisor, running around during meetings, to hear the Americans tell the Israelis that we're going to withhold arms and then trying to force them into a ceasefire with a group that's as bad as ISIS, it's just heartbreaking. There's a palpable sense that they know they need to stay close to America, and I encourage them to stay close to America. But they long for the old days. They long for the Trump administration, because they know, and I know, and you know, Hugh, October 7th would have never happened if President Trump had still been president. There wouldn't have been a sense of weakness of America and its allies, and Iran would have never permitted this to happen. And so
Afghanistan would not have collapsed as it did. Do you agree with that statement, Ambassador O'Brien?
100%, Hugh. Kabul was a catastrophe, and it gave solace and buoyed up the spirits of all the terrorist organizations around the world, from the terrorist regime in Moscow to attacking Ukraine to Iran to the Hamas, and encouraged their attack on Israel because they thought America was a feckless ally. And unfortunately, right now we're showing it with our putting pressure on Israel and not putting pressure on Hamas. It's pretty outrageous.
Mr. Ambassador, I want to stick in one political question before we go back to national security. You're on some of the Veep stakes lists that the great mentioner has out there, because not only do you know your national security and your law, you're also LDS, and you would be a great assistant in Arizona and Nevada. Have you talked with anyone about becoming vice president with Donald Trump?
No, look, the only thing we need to do now, and it's more apparent than ever being overseas, is we've got to elect Donald Trump to be president of the United States. And we need to return to a peace through strength foreign policy, because this all the talk about de-escalation and appeasement just signals weakness to our adversaries. And it's dangerous for America. It's dangerous for our partners and allies like Israel around the world. And that's how you end up with Hamas. That's how you end up with Hamas holding American hostages and us doing nothing about it.
So you have not talked to the former president about being his running mate?
I don't want to comment on that, but
all right, don't.
I just want to see the president get elected. I'm not concerned about my role in the administration. I want to see President Trump come back for the American people.
Let me go back then, Mr. Ambassador, to the Israeli policy vis-a-vis the United States. 800,000 people, it's probably up now, have been evacuated from Rafah. But Jake Sullivan, your successor as National Security Advisor, is running around Israel saying you've got to establish a Palestinian state in order to get a deal with Saudi Arabia. You dealt with MSB when you were in the National Security West Wing office. Do you think Saudi Arabia insists on a Palestinian state before they normalize with Israel?
Well, that was never a condition with us, and so maybe it's a new condition. I don't know what Jake's talking to NBS about or KBS, but look, the key job here is what President Trump said and what I've said from the start, is they need to finish, the IDF and Israel need to finish off Hamas the way we finished off ISIS. They need to destroy the physical caliphate. They need to get the leadership out of Rafah, kill or capture them, and they need to rescue the hostages. And only then can you start talking about the day after and what's to come. But look, normalization between Saudi and Israel would be good. It would be great to add them to the Abraham Accords. But the first order of business is getting rid of this caliphate that's holding American and Israeli hostages and is creating terrorism in the region. And we got to help the IDF finish the job.
I want to underscore what a diplomat does when his interlocutor says something dumb. I didn't refer to MBS as MBS. I said MSB, and he didn't correct me. He just said MBS. Thank you for that, Ambassador. Tell me, though, about President Sisi. I don't recall you telling me if you have spent time with President Sisi, but it seems to me that Egypt, are they saying one thing publicly and another thing privately about the Philadelphia corridor?
Well, look, President Sisi and I have spent time with him, and he was a very strong general. He had to come in and get the Muslim Brotherhood out of Egypt, and the only place there's been a Muslim Brotherhood government outside of Egypt for a short period of time is Gaza. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood, and we saw the terror and the tragedy and the poverty and why we lost all the money going into building terrorist tunnels to attack Israel. That's what you get with a Muslim Brotherhood government. So General Sisi, President Sisi understands that, and I think he's trying to work with the Israelis to make sure that Hamas is done and finished in Gaza.
Now, Lord Andrew Roberts, the historian, stood up in the House of Lords on Friday and said the ratio of civilian casualty to terrorist dead or wounded is 1-to-1 or at worst 2-to-1, both of which are records for a civilized army. Do you agree with Lord Roberts, and are we over pressuring Israel on their tactics to the detriment of the persecution of the war?
Well, I always agree with Lord Roberts. He's a smart guy. He's a good friend, and great member of the House of Lords in the UK. Wrote a terrific biography of Winston Churchill, so he knows what he's talking about. And I spent time with the Brigadier General this morning. It was just, you could see how pained he was. Israel's lost hundreds of soldiers in this war, and they've lost the soldiers because they're taking such care to avoid civilian casualties. They've got general officers like we do in the U.S. Army. They paper neighborhoods with leaflets when they're going to attack, so they give the enemy advance notice. That allows Hamas to dig in and set up booby traps to take out the incoming IDF soldiers. The lengths that the Israelis go to show their values are different than Hamas, to show that they're civilized and they're fighting barbarians, is enormous, and it puts their soldiers at risk. And yet they're the ones being accused of genocide by these crazies. They're the ones the ICC is investigating. When we had a true act of genocide on October 7th, genocide we haven't seen since the Holocaust with Jews. I mean, we've seen it in Rwanda and other places, but we haven't seen a genocide against Jews like October 7th since 1939. And yet the ICC is investigating Israel, and people are complaining about how the Israelis are prosecuting the war. I believe they're doing it in the most humane way I've ever seen an army conduct a war. In fact, the enemy is far more warning than the U.S. Army or U.S. Air Force gives our enemies.
Have you picked up whether or not it is a fait accompli that Israel will move into southern Lebanon on their northern border before rather than after the conclusion of the Gaza war?
Well, look, having a two-front war, and I've talked to some of the Israeli senior leadership and the military leadership about this. We know history doesn't judge folks who go into two-front wars voluntarily well. And so I think Israel would be better off finishing up the job in Rafah, which could be done quickly if the U.S. supports them, and stops with the, hampering their efforts. And then they've got to turn to the north. And Hezbollah is going to make a decision. Do they want to be Iran's proxy and become martyrs for Iran, or do they want to maintain their lifestyle in Lebanon? But the idea that Hezbollah can have the same type of units that Hamas had, meters away from Israeli villages, with commandos ready to storm across and rape and kill Israeli women and children at a moment's notice, that can't be possible. And in fact, the UN has told Hezbollah in Resolution 1701, move up north of the Litani River. So I think Israel needs to finish off their job in Rafah and finish off Hamas, and then they got to go and have a concerted diplomatic effort to explain to Hezbollah the same thing will happen to them that happened to Hamas if they don't back off.
Mr. Ambassador, the People's Republic of China has a relationship with Israel. Have you talked to anyone about whether or not they've got to reassess that relationship in light of what we've done vis-a-vis TikTok in the United States? And was that a good choice that the Congress and the President made?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've raised the TikTok issue with every Israeli official, and told them they need to understand that the Chinese are using TikTok to divide America. They're using it to support Hamas, and that they're using Israel to divide their society as well. And look, it's not just TikTok; it's these electric vehicles from China that are full of sensors that they're exporting to Israel and other countries, and we've got to stop those from coming in too. As far as the Congress, I'm glad Congress passed the legislation on TikTok. I was in favor of a full ban, and President Trump, at the end of his administration, banned TikTok from being used. Unfortunately, it was overturned in court, and the Biden administration rescinded the order. But I think the second best thing after a ban is to have TikTok owned by an American company and try and keep the data out of the Chinese hands. So whether that could be done or not, we'll have to wait and see. But I supported the bill because it was certainly better than the status quo, where the Chinese Communist Party has access to your phone, all your data on your phone, your passwords, your medical records, your text messages, your social media posts. I mean, everything on your phone is the property of TikTok if they're on your phone. So
I'm glad to hear you're talking to the Israelis about it, because it's my belief. I've heard a lot of Israeli guests on with Dan Senor, some Israeli guests on the Times of Israel podcast, What Matters Now, their daily update. And they're all amazed at how overwhelming the pro-Hamas propaganda has been that Americans are reacting to. And I said they should not be surprised. TikTok is like they're mainlining pro-Hamas stuff into kids' arms. Is that true?
It's absolutely true. And you can put a profile on TikTok that says you're an 18-year-old male interested in automobiles, and every third ad will come up as a pro-Hamas propaganda ad. So they're shoving it into the bloodstream of our kids. And listen, if you're a young airman out at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, where you've got your new affiliate, get off TikTok. They want to geolocate you. They want to know where you are, what you're doing, and that goes for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, not just in Vance, but all over the world at any base. Stay off TikTok because the Chinese are building a profile on you if you're a U.S. serviceman or woman, and you don't want to have any part of that.
I didn't know that Enid was home to an Air Force base, but I'm going to say to my new affiliate, KGWA, if the National Security Advisor is talking to you, you got to tune in every day. Does Enid have an Air Force base?
It does. Vance Air Force Base is where they train our young pilots to become fighter pilots and tanker pilots and C-130 pilots, and it's a beautiful city out in the plains, and Oklahoma's a great state, as you know, but Enid has been the host of Vance Air Force Base for many years.
Okay, last question. Are you feeling confident about President Trump returning to the White House?
Well, I hope so. Look, I'm notoriously bad at the polls. The polls look really good for the president, all the swing states, and look, I think Americans they've got a choice here. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And now they can look back 4 years ago and see what President Trump did on the foreign policy and national security. There was peace in the world. We were getting peace agreements all over. There were no wars. President Trump didn't get us into a new war, and we had a great economy. And so if you want to return to those good old days, it's a pretty easy choice, in my view.
Ambassador Robert O'Brien, thank you for joining me. I know you're on your way to an important meeting with another senior Israeli official, so thank you for finding the time to call in. I appreciate it from Tel Aviv.
Great to be with you, Hugh.